Okay, I think I will get started so that we have great presentations ahead of us, and I want to be respectful of all of your time and for being here on time. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this conversation about mining threats in the Sierra Nevada region and as well in California's desert. My name is Liz. I am the Sierra Nevada Alliance 30 by 30 coordinator. Before I hand over to our presenters and introduce them to all of you, I would like to invite you to the Sierra Nevada Conservation Conference happening in Salt Lake Tahoe on November 7th and 8th. Leah, who is also from Sierra Nevada Alliance, will put at the a link on the chat in case you would like to learn more about that conference. During the conference, one of our presenters today actually is going to be presenting and discussing a little bit more at that conference. I would also like to invite you to join the statewide Powering Nature Coalition, where organizations from across California come together to help conserve, protect, and restore 30% of California lands and water by 2030. Many of you I know are members of that coalition, and for who have never heard about Power in Nature, Leah is also putting in the chat the link for Power in Nature and how to register to the Power in Nature Coalition. So today we're very excited to have four panelists who will be discussing mining trusts in California. We will focus, as I said earlier, we will focus especially on mining threats in the Sierra Nevada region and in the high desert of the Eastern Sierra. Our panelists will provide a quick overview of mining impacts, discuss what is currently happening in our region, and highlight what we can do to support and protect these important landscapes for mining development. Our presenters today are Jared Neymark. He's the California mining organizer at Earthworks. Maybe Jared, if you can just pop up and say hi so that people can connect the name with the face.
Hi, everyone. Really great to be here. Thanks for joining today.
Our second panelist is Ralph. And I'm sorry, Ralph, if I misspell your last name, Silberstein, president of Community Environmental Advocates Foundation.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, glad to be here.
And then we have Wendy Schneider, executive director of Friends of the Inyo.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming.
And Jaime Lopez Walters, Deserts Lands Organizer at Friends of the Inyo.
Hi, glad to be here too.
So they will get started and present, and after the presentation, we will have a Q&A session. People were invited to submit their questions, so I have a couple of questions that we will facilitate and discuss with the panelists. And but you can also pop any questions you might have during the presentation or during the Q&A. Jared, I will let you take it away now, and I will share my screen so that we can share the slides.
Sounds great. Well, thank you so much for the invitation to be a part of this great discussion today. My name is Jared Neymark, and I'm the California mining organizer with Earthworks. We're a national nonprofit organization that works to protect communities and the environment from the impacts of extractive industries while promoting sustainable solutions. And I'm based here on Ohlone Lands in San Francisco, but as our organizer, California organizer in the mining program, I work statewide in solidarity with communities and grassroots organizations that are protecting land, air, and water from the impacts of mining and exploration throughout the state. And today I'm gonna give a pretty quick overview of the impacts of mining and some of the threats we're seeing in the Sierras and beyond. And then I'm excited that we'll get to hone in more detail on some of the great work being done by Ralph, Wendy, and Jaime. So next slide, please. So really quickly, this is just a map of some of the current exploration and mining proposals that I'm aware of throughout the state related to gold. And this isn't necessarily a comprehensive map. If you know of projects that aren't on here, please send them my way. But these are ones that I'm currently following or engaged in some way in collaboration with folks on the ground. Next slide, please. And so as folks on this webinar are probably aware, mining has changed a lot from the gold rush era days, which we're still healing from the social and environmental impacts of. But now with the scale of destruction, with new mining technology, with big open pits and chemical processes, communities all over the world are facing forced displacement, toxic waste, deadly tailings disasters, and perpetual pollution of watersheds. And just in the US West, more than 40% of our watersheds are polluted from mining. And mining has a disproportionate impact on indigenous peoples by destroying sacred sites, violating religious freedoms, and building man camps for workers that lead to an increase in violence. Next slide, please. And this is a problem because even though mining has changed a lot in the past 150 years, our main federal law governing mining on US public lands has not. And so this is the 1872 mining law. It was passed only 1 year after the close of US treaty making with tribes, really to encourage settler colonialism and westward expansion. It lists mining as the highest and best use of public lands, and it establishes the current claim system where anyone can go out onto public lands, stake a claim, put a stick in the ground that gives you the right to explore and mine those deposits, which is really problematic. It does not include any environmental protections or standards, and it does not require payment of royalties for minerals extracted from public lands. So as we'll hear when we get to some of the campaigns going on in the Sierras, this mining law poses a huge challenge for our work to protect landscapes from the impacts of mining when we're really dealing with this outdated system that governs mining on public lands in the US West. Next slide, please. And so just to give a very quick overview of the different stages of the mining process, it starts with exploration. We'll hear about some of that today. This involves often exploratory drilling to test the location and quality of a mineral deposit. And if through exploration, companies find that there's enough there, enough quality that they want to move on to economically extract that mineral, then they move on to the extraction phase. And this is what you think of when you think of the big open pit mining, large disturbances to land, water, air, and wildlife, and cultural resources. Then there's the processing stage involving chemical treatments, often with open air, extensive water use and wastewater problems. And with gold mining in particular, what we've seen is a trend towards cyanide heap leach mining, where you have these big piles of ore, a cyanide solution is poured through in order to remove the microscopic amounts of gold from that. And we often end up with cyanide spills into the environment, which can be very toxic. And finally, you have reclamation at the end of life of an exploration or mining project, attempts to reclaim it. And here in California, unlike other states, we have a requirement that at least new open pits past a certain date are required to be backfilled and contoured back to the landscape. But of course, it's really impossible to actually get back to how things were before that mining operation was there, but it's still a step in the right direction to have that requirement. Next slide, please. So this is a very quick overview of some of the many impacts of gold mining. I won't get into all of them today, but you can look at our Earthworks website for more details on each of these. But some of the big ones are water quality. So I already mentioned cyanide spills that can impact water quality. Another issue is acid mine drainage that occurs when sulfide minerals are exposed to the atmosphere during the mining process. And here you can see an example of that acidic drainage in surface waters from a mine in Nevada. And this can sometimes require perpetual treatment to deal with acid mine drainage. There's also issues of water quantity, water consumption, especially here in the Sierras and the California deserts. Massive amounts of water are required for dust suppression and other activities related to the mining process. And many of us have been consistently asking this question, where is the water going to come from for these mining projects, and what will the impact of that be? There's also impacts to wildlife. From the exploration projects that we're seeing right now, many of them are proposing access roads to be constructed into sensitive desert ecosystems where we can still see the scars of unreclaimed past roads in those areas. And so this is a really significant issue when it comes to wildlife, as well as the noise and dust and light and vibrations from exploratory drilling, not to mention the potential of a large-scale mining operation that follows. And then finally, we're seeing threats to tribal cultural landscapes held sacred by tribes across California and the US West. These areas are often targeted for extraction by mining companies. And because of the 1872 mining law, it's very tough, even in these areas that are extremely important to protect, to get our federal agencies to say, no, a mining project just doesn't belong in such a sacred area. Next slide, please. And one other aspect that I want to highlight that I'm sure many folks on this call are aware of is the boom and bust cycle of mining. This is still going on. We think of it kind of as a gold rush era, historic mining days thing, but because metal prices are extremely volatile, even with minerals that are in high demand right now, such as cobalt, when the price changes, conditions can change for the company. And so this is a headline from last year of a proposed cobalt mine. There was so much hype for this mine to open and promises of economic growth and jobs in Idaho. And it actually closed before it even opened because the price dropped and the company decided it was no longer worth it for them to mine that deposit. Next slide, please. Now, when it comes to gold, we really don't need to mine more gold. Only 7% in 2022 went towards electronics or other uses. The rest of gold mined in 2022 went to jewelry, gold bars, bank vaults for investments. And gold is highly recyclable. There's more than 50 times already above ground than the identified reserves below ground. And producing that one wedding ring from new mining for gold generates 20 tons of waste. So we could actually end all gold mining and use recycling to meet all of our demand for technological needs and up to 45% of demand for jewelry right now. So just to put it in perspective, that, what are these companies really after when they're pushing these gold projects? Well, the price of gold is high right now, so that's what they're interested in. There's really little beneficial end use for mining gold. Next slide, please. Now, when it comes to other minerals that are useful in the energy transition, these are things like lithium, nickel, cobalt that go into electric vehicle batteries. We know that these are really important for a just transition away from fossil fuels and towards renewable energy. And so Earthworks has a campaign called Making Clean Energy Clean, Just, and Equitable, where we're really trying to advocate for, first of all, using as little new mining as possible as we make this transition. This means maximizing circular economy solutions, things like recycling batteries at the end of their life, making sure that our transit systems are designed to use fewer minerals and smaller batteries to have less of that impact. And where new mining does occur, we need to make sure it meets the highest standards for the environment and human rights. And so we know right now there's lithium mines proposed just over the border in Nevada that will have significant environmental impacts. And also right here in Imperial County in Southern California, there's proposals for a technology called direct lithium extraction, this being proposed as less environmentally harmful. And so Earthworks, in partnership with our environmental justice allies there, we're not opposed to the lithium extraction projects in Imperial Valley, but we want to see them done right, watchdog these projects, make sure that they're held accountable to the highest standards for environmental protection so that we don't repeat the same harms of the mining industry over and over again. And you can find more info about that on our website. Next slide, please. So before I close, I just wanted to give a quick overview. You're going to hear from Wendy and Jaime about some of the work at Conglomerate Mesa and other projects on federal public lands. And the main decision maker there is the Bureau of Land Management or other federal agencies. And so you're going to hear about the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA, and environmental impact statements, or EISs, that require public participation. And I just wanted to clarify that because from Ralph, you're going to hear about the Idaho Maryland mine, which is on private land. And so the main decision maker is Nevada County, and you're dealing with California Environmental Quality Act requirements and an environmental impact report, which have some similarities and differences, but just wanted to set the groundwork to avoid any confusion. And there's a few other things on this slide where it gets more complicated that we can go back to if questions come up. But just wanted to highlight that there's some differences in the case studies you're going to be hearing about. Next slide, please. And before I close, I just wanted to highlight one other victory that we had this year in solidarity with the Quechan tribe and in partnership with many conservation and environmental justice organizations. It's just so rare in working on mining justice to have these victories because the mining companies just come back again and again as long as there's a deposit they want to mine it. And so it's really important to celebrate them when we have them. And earlier this year we did win an appeal with Imperial County, and we're able to for now stop a gold exploration project that would have damaged a Quechan sacred site and sensitive desert habitat along the Colorado River. So this is a really fantastic victory, and I'm excited that we'll hear from some more victories today and get to share inspiration, tactics, and solidarity with each other. And next slide, please. And thank you. I'm excited for the rest of the conversation. Feel free to get in touch if there's any questions we don't get to in the Q&A today. Thanks.
Thank you, Jared. That was wonderful. I really appreciate you. Hey, Wendy. Can you hear me?
Hi, everybody. Like Lee said, I'm Wendy Schneider. I am Executive Director of Friends of the Inyo, and Jaime, our Desert Lands organizer, is going to also be presenting today. You go ahead, next slide. And yeah, so yeah, let's go to the map. Let's go onto the map. So currently, Friends of the Inyo is defending against industrial mining exploration projects in 3 different places in our working area. And our working area is the area we now refer to as California's Eastern Sierra, including all of Inyo and Mono counties. And from north to south, these 3 threatened areas are the Bodie Hills, Hot Creek, and Conglomerate Mesa. And all 3 areas occur along this Walker Lane Carlin Gold deposit. And a Carlin Gold deposit is characterized by low-grade, disseminated ore. And for this reason, economically viable extraction operations have to be geographically big and require cyanide heap leaching. And as Jared explained, this is a process that results in toxicity that is very difficult to remediate. And, and these projects have lots and lots of impacts, as Jared described. But we can go to the next slide. All right, so I just want to take a moment to point out that on all of the campaigns that Jaime and I will discuss, Friends of the Inyo works in coalition with many different organizations. And I want everybody to understand that our successes should be credited to all of these organizations, including Earthworks. And Earthworks has been an invaluable partner to us. We also work with a lot of members of the indigenous community, both tribes and individual members, and other conservation groups. And these are just some of them. This probably isn't even an exhaustive list. So next slide. So we'll start with the Bodie Hills in northern Mono County. And like all of the areas we will discuss, it is a culturally and ecologically special area that for many reasons is just inappropriate for industrial mining. It's a biodiversity hotspot, home to many species, and importantly for its defense, it is a core stronghold population of the bi-state sage grouse, which, as you guys know, there's a lot of debate all the time, enjoys some state and federal protections at some times. It's also an area that has been important to the indigenous community for more than 10,000 years, and it's home to many cultural resources. So we can go to the next slide. So at this time, there are no active mining projects on the California side of the Bodie Hills, but unfortunately, the Nevada side is seeing a lot of mining exploration activity, which is including extensive road building and drilling on hundreds of sites. And I'm happy to say that the Bodie Hills Conservation Partnership will be focusing more time and resources on the Nevada side starting in 2025. So, as Jared mentioned, the avenues available to us to defend against these exploration projects are provided by NEPA's requirement of environmental studies and public participation. And this requirement enables us to submit technical comment letters to the land management agencies that show the many detrimental impacts that these projects will have on the land. So in these technical comment letters, and they are sometimes 30 or 40 pages long, and parts of them are written by all the different partners. And we point out all the ways that the mining exploration project and the road building and other things that need to come along with it are inconsistent with the area's management plan and potentially inconsistent with other laws and statutes, such as the Endangered Species Act or the California Endangered Species Act. And with respect to the Bodie Hills, we have focused on the significant damage to species, especially the bi-state sage grouse. And we've also highlighted and focused strongly on the many areas and resources important to the indigenous community that would be compromised by these projects. So in addition to these technical comment letters, we organize expressions of concern and opposition from as many other groups and kinds of stakeholders as we can, depending on the situation. So in the Bodie Hills, and also Jaime will discuss this with respect to Conglomerate Mesa, this includes the indigenous community. And when we are working with the indigenous community or very important partners, we are always mindful that we are working with a sovereign nation and with an entity that may have had negative experiences with white-led conservation groups and or the federal land managers. So we always reach out with respect and humility to see if we can offer assistance by providing information about the project and or help them with their own raising of concerns or opposition to the project. And we are mindful that the tribes often have a lot of different priorities they are juggling. So we always reach out as soon as possible, with respect to timing, so that we can give them as much time as possible to sort of digest what's happening and see what kind of assistance they want and, help them respond to what's going on. And in the Bodie Hills, other notable groups that we have organized with include private landowners and recreation interests. And these are two groups that are aligned in the sense that they don't want to see, lots of roads built, big, heavy trucks rumbling by, and sort of the dust, noise, and light 24/7 that comes from these kinds of projects. Okay, next slide. So in addition to working to stop discrete projects and proposals, we are also working on permanently insulating the area from these kinds of projects. And this is true for all three of the areas we will discuss today. And also with all three areas, we are working with the indigenous community on these permanent protection proposals and will not move forward with any of them unless and until the indigenous community is in agreement with the proposed strategy. So in the Bodie Hills, our long-term permanent protection strategy right now is to leverage the existing areas that are already protected as wilderness study areas. And you can see those in kind of the dark yellow. And we want to establish an area of critical environmental concern that knits them together. And you can see how it's kind of like a puzzle piece that's in the lighter yellow. And the goal is to establish an area of critical environmental concern that includes management prescriptions that are just inconsistent with mining projects, exploration projects, or other kinds of projects. And this will give BLM or the other land manager that might have power over the area kind of the ability to say, hey, mining company, we'd love to help you out, but your proposal, it's inconsistent with the management plan for this area. So no, you can't do it. All right, next slide. So moving south on down the Carlin Lane, we come to Hot Creek, which is located in Long Valley, which is in southern Mono County. And like the Bodie Hills, this area is consistently threatened. And an exploration project was performed, and especially the roads very imperfectly remediated in the 1980s. And then they came back. So let's go to the next slide. So the most recent threat that we defeated arose in 2021. And although we, the coalition partners, submitted a technical comment letter and organized opposition to the proposed project, the Inyo National Forest approved it, and approved it as a categorical exclusion, even though the proposed project did not meet the requirements of any single categorical exclusion category provided by NEPA. Instead, it stitched two together. So our attorney partners advised us that this was not in compliance with NEPA and encouraged us to bring a lawsuit. And this really shows the power of working in coalition. And this was a little bit of a thing for Friends of the Inyo, because we were formed kind of as a stewardship group that helped the Inyo National Forest. We've been around for 35 years and we've never sued anybody, much less the Inyo National Forest. But we did. We agreed to be lead plaintiff on the lawsuit. And unfortunately, we lost at trial, but our attorney partners, being super competent and knowledgeable, encouraged us to appeal, as this was an important issue, like across the American West. Stitching two categorical exclusions together, that's not okay. And if this kind of went through, it would have created a precedent that other projects like this could go through in other states. And this could, just have really long-reaching effects. So we decided to appeal. We took it to the Ninth Circuit. And not only did we win at the Ninth Circuit, but the court granted our request for an injunction. So literally about 3 days before the trucks and the drills were going to roll in, the project got stopped. And as you can imagine, this was a very exciting victory for all of the groups involved. And like Jared said, it's really important to mark these incremental victories, because they are hard won. And this mining company could come back, but they can't come back with that project. And we are hoping, and they haven't so far, and we are hoping that it was kind of with the CADX kind of version that it was economically viable, and that if they have to do a real environmental impact statement, that it will be too expensive to be economically viable, or there will be too much uncertainty. Anyway, we're hoping that they don't come back. And this was an important victory that had far-reaching effects for these kinds of proposals across the American West. We have now established with Ninth Circuit authority that a project is not okay if it stitches two CADXs together. It has to fit into one. All right, next slide. So we are also have a plan for long-term protection in the area, and that is to seek a mineral withdrawal. All right, next slide. So moving on down to the southern end of the Walker Lane Carlin deposit, we come to Conglomerate Mesa in southern Inyo County. And like the Bodie Hills and Hot Creek, this area is ecologically and culturally special and totally inappropriate for mining activities. It is home to the Inyo Rock Daisy, now listed under the California Endangered Species Act as threatened. And it also has a thriving Joshua tree forest, including many healthy young trees. And most importantly, it is an area that is important to at least two tribes in the area. And they have been using it for various purposes for more than 10,000 years and do not wish to see it desecrated by mining projects. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jaime to talk more about our efforts and campaigns.
Thank you. Yeah, so Conglomerate Mesa is under threat from a large destructive mining exploration operation by a company called K2 Gold. They have a local subsidiary called Mojave Precious Metals who actually applied for the permit. And the proposal that they have envisioned would build over 3 miles of roads in an area that is currently roadless, 30 drill pads throughout this mesa, and 120 holes. Each of them could be up to 1,000 feet deep. So it's a big proposal. Particularly the road is really concerning as well. So if it was to go through, the light and the noise and the dust that it would produce would be awful and would really be disturbing to wildlife and the habitat in the area. Actually, K2 Gold came and did an initial round of exploration. This is their second proposal. In the first round, we, the Coalition to Protect Conglomerate Mesa, we utilized NEPA and the requirement of land management to consider alternatives to argue for helicopter-only access, meaning that the mining company wouldn't be allowed to build any roads. This was the alternative that the land manager, the BLM, actually chose. which is really important because it substantially increased the expenses for the mining company for that first round of exploration, and it also substantially decreased the impacts to land and wildlife. I wanted to give you a plug for, if you can go to the next slide, please, thank you. So, so we have a film that's called Island in the Sky, and it tells the story of Conglomerate Mesa and the mining threat, and it also introduces you to the area and to the cast of characters that's working to protect it. So we really encourage you to watch this film. You can go to our website, protectconglomeratemesa.com. It's also on Vimeo, it's on YouTube. There'll be links in the chat for you to go to that, and it's 20 minutes long, and it really gives you a good sense of that place. And you know, as the slide shows, sort of it juxtaposes the sort of the landscape that we have now versus what it could be if a full-scale mine was to happen in an area like that. Next slide, please. So for some of you, you may remember that there was a previous comment period about Conglomerate Mesa regarding exploration in 2021. And our defense effort back then included a strong push for our technical comment letter for the BLM to require an EIS for this project, because it was actually only being considered as an EA, which is an environmental assessment, sort of a lower grade, less strenuous process that they were having to go through. And there was also a big push to encourage people to comment, and there was 24,000 people that commented on the EA. And the BLM actually did decide to require an EIS. So at that time in 2021, the mining company protested and said, this has never been done before, we're pulling out, and it felt like a victory. So it was one of those moments where, you know, we rejoiced for a moment, and then literally a month later, the mining company came back and was like, actually, we are going to do this EIS. And so that's the process that we're in now. And there's been a scoping period for the EIS. And now we expect the draft EIS to come out in March of 2025. That's the latest update we got from the BLM. So at that time, in March, or when it comes out, is when we really encourage people to provide their comment and oppose this project. And there's a multitude of ways to do that. ProtectConglomerateMesa.com is going to have a way for you to comment. friendsoftheinyo.org will as well. Or you can go directly to the BLM's website, which is eplanning.blm.gov. If you want to stay informed about when this EIS actually will come out and when your chance to comment is, we encourage you to sign up for our newsletter, Inyo de Coso. And also go look at the last newsletter that we put out in September, because it's a really good sort of way to familiarize yourself with the area and the issues. Next slide. So as in the other campaigns, you know, we're hoping to not continually be fighting one mining company after another. You know, this area has seen mining companies wanting to explore it, or actually explore it, since the 80s. So we're working on a permanent protection solution for Conglomerate Mesa. And in that context, it's really critical that we work with the indigenous community, like Wendy said previously. And so we're working with the Lone Pine Paiute Shoshone tribe and the Chimbasha tribe out of Death Valley. Both of them consider this their ancestral homelands. And so we're hoping to put a permanent protection proposal forward in early 2025. Wendy, I'm going to pass it back to you.
All right, thank you so much. Make sure I'm not on mute. Okay, so I was just going to sum it up really quick to say that, you know, with respect to defending against these industrial mining exploration projects, Friends of the Inyo, and always working in coalition, and we've talked today some of the ways about our coalition partners really help us. You know, we're a small regional environmental group, and so, you know, when we get legal expertise, technical expertise, you know, that's really, really helpful. And we speak really strongly to the land managers, and with a really credible voice when we can write these long technical comment letters with a lot of scientific information. So we oppose these projects, you know, with these really credible technical comment letters. And then we also do a lot of organizing, and we reach out to as many different types of people and organizations as we can who we think also might have concerns about these projects. This includes the indigenous community, businesses, the recreation community, private landowners, and also local, state, and federal electeds. You know, one of our you know, tactics is to talk to people like the Inyo County Board of Supervisors and the planning department, and just keep educating and keep raising our concerns. We also place articles and letters to the editor in newspapers. We speak out on the radio doing shows. We organize demonstrations. And In the end, if none of that has worked, we bring a lawsuit if it's appropriate. And I just want to encourage everybody on the webinar, if you are facing a project or a proposal coming to town, we're always willing to help share our campaign plans and our expertise and the ideas and the things that have worked for us.
We are holding the questions for later on. Thank you so much. It was very informative. As Wendy mentioned, please visit their website. I think it was also added to the chat, and I will definitely be following up with the slides and the recording and some of the critical links that was mentioned during this presentation. Ralph, we'd love to hear from you now.
Yes, can you hear me? Okay, so CEA generally reviews and responds to development projects in Nevada County, but today I'm talking obviously about the reopening of the Idaho Maryland mine. This project has been our main focus for about 4 years now. Slide, please. Next slide. Okay, so the mine is located in Grass Valley. Here's a map. It's northeast of Sacramento, about an hour's drive, and west of Lake Tahoe in the Sierra Nevada. Next slide. The mine started in the 1860s. There were 2 mines, Idaho and Maryland mines, that merged, and then later on they consolidated multiple other hard rock mines over time and ultimately became one of the most productive mines in the United States. The underground holdings currently are 2,585 acres, which is a huge area underneath Grass Valley. The mine closed in 1956 and was allowed to reflood. Currently, it's held by Rise Gold Corporation. Next slide, please. So there are 2 sites. They're outlined in red on this map. Hopefully you can see that. And the 56-acre Centennial site, you can see, is on the upper left box, and it's on the corner of Centennial Drive and Idaho Maryland Road. And then the other box to the right and down is a 119-acre Brunswick site on Brunswick Road. The downtown Grass Valley is right there on the left of the image, and so this whole area is fairly developed now. Slide, please. So we see a pattern with Canadian junior mining companies where they buy old mines on speculation and try to open them. In this case, in 1996, Empire Gold submitted and won a permit for a 5-year use permit to explore and do dewatering. They provided some protections for well owners, which was a major issue, and some other conditions, but it was pretty thin on protections overall. And but they failed to secure funding to actually execute their plan. Next slide, please. So then in 2006, they came back with M Gold Mining Company, which is started a fairly effective public relations campaign over the course of several years, and they gained quite a bit of support by the city and businesses. And in 2008, we formed the Citizens Looking at Impacts of Mining, or CLAIM, as it was known, a nonprofit group to address this project. Our primary focus was a review of the Environmental Impact Report, the EIR. As Jared mentioned, that's the California Environmental Required Studies under CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act. And we did op-eds and other things in the media and funded legal comments and some expert opinions for comments on the EIR. The scope of the deficiencies in the draft EIR required a draft EIR recirculation, which is an expensive process. And so M Gold Mining failed to secure funding and they sold off their assets. Next slide, please. So, so now we're up to the current project, which is Rise Gold Corporation. They acquired the property in 2017. In 2019, they applied for an 80-year use permit. The processing facilities would be located on the Brunswick site, and the product would be gold concentrate and engineered fill. Gold concentrate, it's just gold ore that's not quite completely processed, will be shipped elsewhere for final processing. The term engineered fill is a euphemism they created for compacted mine waste. The mine rock waste rock, I should say, and tailings were to be dumped at 2 locations. The Brunswick site, covering 31 acres to heights of 90 feet, and that would take place over a period of 5 years. And on the Centennial site, covering 44 acres to heights of 55 feet over 6 years. These are huge mining waste piles, basically. And then after that, for 65 years remaining, they would do off-site aggregate sales was their proposal. Next slide, please. So this image shows the Brunswick site with Brunswick Road along the right side and East Bend along the top. And the whole surrounding area is surrounded by residential neighborhoods. Next slide, please. This is the same view with project details. So on the lower part of this image in light tan is shown the 31-acre mine waste pile after it's been developed, their engineered fill, so to speak. And the rectangular dark areas shown on the upper parts of the thing are the 120,000 square feet of ore processing facilities. To give you a sense of the scale, just the one processing facility structure on the upper end would cover about the area of 1.5 football fields and be 6 stories tall. Next slide, please. So the main impacts of this project are huge, or would be huge. We've been talking about putting a massive industrial facility in a rural residential setting, and then building huge invisible tailings piles. And then to top it off, groundwater levels for hundreds of domestic wells were at risk from dewatering the mine. Then there's the problem of asbestos burying rock, which can create serious health issues if it becomes airborne when it's being ground or processed or shipped. And there's water pollution and also greenhouse gas emissions, habitat destruction, air pollution, noise, traffic, the list goes on. The project just has a lot of impacts, and it always will. It's just a very difficult project to develop. In a way, it is crazy to even consider opening a mine with this many issues and then in a developed residential area. But you have to respond to these challenges because they do get approved. So we saw a lot of greenwashing. They touted sustainable mining, which is quite the oxymoron. All mines run out when the ore runs out. RISE did mitigate a few of the impacts, and they did some more studies than previously, but they really only identified the problems. They didn't really solve them. And the biggest problem of all always turns around to be mine waste. Here, in this case, they wanted to ship it out, but the contaminants in that mine waste were an issue. In 2006, M-Gold proposed fusing the tailings into ceramic tiles, which was a very creative idea if they could get it to work, but they actually the project never reached fruition. Anyway, next slide, please. So I like to think of our response as consisting of 2 major realms, an extensive technical review. So we review the documents, the project elements, and address the EIR. And then there's the major public outreach campaign, which you hope to build a support base and ultimately to inform and influence the deciders. Next slide, please. So for the technical review, we had a volunteer research team of about 15 or 20 people. We were really fortunate to have a lot of in-house, very skilled people. We had in-house experts in planning, general planning, greenhouse gases, and a number of our coalition partners who participated. And they have expertise in other areas such as hydrology and so forth. So it's a huge resource for us. We're very fortunate in that sense. And we also had paid consultants in the form of legal analysis for the EIR comments, and some experts to support that, and some really gnarly topics like traffic studies and air pollution and so forth. So the results of our studies were basically there's significant defects in the project application documents, as well as defects in the draft EIR. And it gave us a real solid basis for our campaign and a solid basis to challenge it under CEQA if needed. And it also established us as a credible and trusted source of information, which is really important. Next slide, please. Our public outreach campaign was extensive. We had a campaign website called MineWatch, newsletters, social media. We had to go through a learning curve on that over the last few years, and it changes every year, so it's always a challenge, but that's huge these days. Webinars, tabling, petitions, fun events, op-eds, press releases, canvassing. We even participated in a couple parades. We're a volunteer-run organization, and I say there it's a lot of work, and it truly is a lot of work. Fortunately, we had a lot of people who were motivated. And as I mentioned, we hired a skilled consultant for our outreach activities, and she did a great job. Next slide, please. So here's some guidelines that we used that I think are pretty important. What resonates with the mainstream? In other words, if you don't focus on endangered species so much as maybe focus on groundwater for well owners, which is kind of a property rights issue, and it's really a personal issue. People can suffer huge financial losses. So find those things which appeal to the broadest audience. Strive for accuracy. It needs to be defensible. Mine promoters will attempt to undermine your credibility at every chance they get. Make it easy to understand. Avoid hyperbole in publications. I know here, save the passion for personal op-eds. So we tried to keep a distinction between what is our organizational publications and what individuals want to say about it. And then promote defined actions for supporters. Next slide, please. So one of our key campaign elements was the MineWatch website, which we created, and it was kept very active with postings and analysis and so forth. Because this was a COVID era, the whole social media and online presence was really huge in this campaign. Next slide, please. I also have to say we had some good fortune along the way. We have some experienced board members who are very skilled at development projects. We had a skilled and effective outreach coordinator that we hired. We had a marketing pro who was a volunteer who dedicated timeless hours supporting the website and social media, and she deserves a shout out for her extraordinary work. And we had many, many dedicated volunteers and a strong coalition. Also, the project was flawed in many ways, and the EIR was really flawed. You know, and the PR campaign from the mine this time was really a tone-deaf campaign. They produced a dubious economic study. And you may not know this, but even if you come back with an environmental impact report that identifies, 5 significant and unavoidable impacts, the lead agency, the decision makers like the county or the city can override that with the statement of overriding considerations and ignore that. And they usually look for some economic motivation, like, oh, we're going to get lots of money. So it's pretty significant that their economic study was not done very well. And there are a lot of unaddressed impacts. So all these things together gave us a very credible basis for denial. And then to top it all off, the executive officer of Rise Gold was found guilty of environmental violations in Canada. So next slide, please. Not to be deterred, Rise Gold resorted to some intimidating tactics. They made accusations of decision-maker bias after the Planning Commission voted against the project and recommended it be denied. And this included exhaustive PRA requests, that's public records requests, to everyone involved in the county and numerous people in several agencies. Later, they submitted a petition claiming that they had vested rights to mine, trying to circumvent the need for a county use permit. And when they lost that hearing, they threatened with more lawsuits. So next slide, please. Sometimes it can be hard, for me anyway, to keep in mind that ultimately the thing that really matters is the final vote by the decision makers. And so it kind of boils down to these simple things which help guide us. And that is build on the facts, try to inform the decision makers as well as you can, demonstrate strong community opposition, and prepare for a legal challenge. Next slide, please. We were able to show a strong community opposition to the project. Here is a group photo in front of the county buildings at one of the hearings. That you might recognize the little no mine signs everybody's holding up. And next slide, please. So the final outcome. We ended up with over 6,000 supporters in our effort to stop the mine. About 800 attended the final hearings. We got at least 150 businesses to sign a letter of opposition, and we secured a unanimous vote to deny the project and to not certify the EIR. But it isn't over yet. In May of this year, Rise Gold filed lawsuits. So now we're dealing with that. Next slide, please. So here's a few takeaways. Decision makers have lots on their plates. Help them do their job. Kind of be on their side, not against them. Try to be accurate and reasonable, as I said. Identify and educate on the issues early in the process. Plan for legal challenges. Hope you don't need them. Use experts as much as you can, although it can be expensive. Build coalitions. Coalitions are huge. We had over 20 groups sign a coalition letter that we submitted, and it's very impressive to do that. And be prepared for the long haul. As we can see now, we may be years on this case with the lawsuit. That's about it. Next slide. Thank you very much. And we're happy to answer questions. You can go to our MineWatch website shown here or submit emails to the Mine Concerns. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ralph. I'm going to stop sharing. We don't have much time for questions, unfortunately. How I'm going to do is like for the questions that were submitted prior to this webinar, I will work with the presenters panelists maybe to see if we can get like some easy bullet points to answer the questions, because we had some really good questions that were really digging a little bit more in the conversation of like permanent protection. I think Wendy and Jaime like shared a couple of tools to do that, and Ralph just mentioned how the work in Nevada County with this mine in particular is not one case. It has been from years, and now they continue to have threats, even though they already spent a lot of resources, time, and funding to do one big win. So I do think it is this discussion of permanent protection is super important. And Wendy, I saw that you were unmute. Do you want to add something to that?
Oh, no, I was just getting ready in case you wanted to ask a specific question. I know that there was one in the chat about the new public lands rule and its implementing guidelines. And I guess I would just want to say that we are actually, and lots of conservation groups are doing this, actively in the process of incorporating the things in those guidelines and things that we can help us into our campaign plans right now. And the way that we think that the public lands rule is going to be able to help us is in the permanent protection realm, like getting the designation of an ACEC or getting a mineral withdrawal. We think that there's going to be avenues, and we are going to be learning right along with BLM and the other land managers since it's all so new. But we're hoping that because it lays out sort of more of a step-by-step process where getting a mineral withdrawal or an ACEC has been very ad hoc, for the last 50 to 100 years, it's sort of different in every situation. We're hoping that sort of the more increased, like I said, sort of step-by-step processes and requirements laid out will help us be able to get those across the finish line more effectively.
That is awesome. And I think maybe we can finish with potentially talking a little bit more if there is not like an urgent questions right now. Also, if you add your questions to the chat, we are going to make sure to go through them and see if we can like share some easy bullet points answers to those questions. But maybe we can finish on that note about permanent protection. Wendy, you just mentioned BLM, public lands rule, but I also curious, and that is very much in the BLM lands. But what about, I think, Ralph, in your case, which is private properties? Is there any tools that you might be like looking that make things a little bit easier and more permanent instead of needing to go to all this process every single time?
Yeah, definitely. There's some language in this falls under the development code and general plans of the county, but there's also impacts from the state in terms of you have mineral resource areas, and then you have the outdated 1872 mining law. So that kind of gives a little bit of cred to all these mining projects coming forward, and it makes it a little bit harder. It actually becomes very complicated. But we feel there's a few things that really need improving, and we've been studying this, but we've been having to wait because of the pending lawsuit. We don't want to try to put something through at the same time, but we feel that there needs to be clarity in the development code that basically says quite distinctly things like, well, you shouldn't try to open an industrial hard rock mine or any kind of mine next to residential areas. I mean, the wording in the general plan infers that, but it's not very clear and determinative. So that's one approach. But I think there's other areas that would really be fruitful in terms of the environmental impacts of non-essential industries and stuff. But these all take a long time to develop, and then you have to get the political will to get the changes done, which is another problem altogether. So it's an interesting topic, and we're really always open to approaches for that or ideas if people want to get involved in that. But we do have our eye on that.
Yeah, everyone, like if you're interested or want to support in future like letters or actions, please. I know that Leia posts a lot of links on the chat. I think that is the best way to keep informed and keep engaged. I would say, I know it's right over the time, so if you need to go, please go. I'm going to see if the panelist presenters will be okay of staying a couple of minutes extra. I do would love to expand a little bit more in the conversation. As you might know, Sierra Nevada Alliance very much engaged with the California 30 by 30 initiative. So protecting important landscapes with like high biodiversity significance. And I know that Wendy mentioned that a little bit, and Jared as well. So maybe we can just talk a little bit about the BLM public lands rule. Of if anyone has a question, I think we can just be together in this next 5 minutes, just so that we don't abruptly end this webinar. Or if Wendy and if there are no questions, then Wendy and Jared and Amy, if you can just expand a little bit more on this like permanent protection options that we can support and consider and put some fuel under those initiatives.
Well, I would say one other thing, and I actually discussed this with folks from the Sierra Club about 6 months ago, that would help both Ralph's situation and our situation would be a statewide ban on cyanide processes. And unbelievably, they have one in Montana, which was passed in the 80s. And it's been attacked twice, and it went by referendum. It's been attacked twice by the state legislature, and it's been strengthened twice because the people saw how destructive this process was, and they have stood by that. So in Montana, super mining friendly state, you can't do cyanide process mining, and so you wouldn't be able to get approval for a project like this. But I spoke with some folks at the Sierra Club, and of course I'm not the first person that's had this idea. It's a politically difficult thing and would really require like a staff and a focused campaign, in the state legislature for a couple of years. And it's something I can see Jared nodding. Jared and I would like to see this campaign happen. And, maybe down the road, we would be able to find funding or find enough big groups, to get some staff people on this. But that would really help to address these gold mining. The price of gold is super high, probably going to stay super high. That's why we're seeing all of these things. They're not going to go away. They're not necessary, as Jared said, for our electronics or anything else. We don't need to mine any more gold. So that would be a way for permanent protection from these kinds of projects to happen.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. I think that's a great idea, but I actually think it really needs to be done at the national level or at statewide, multiple states, because, for instance, in the case of the Idaho Maryland mine, they circumvented the whole issue of doing the cyanide processing or, final processing by creating a gold concentrate, which is, they've concentrated the gold along with some fines that are non-gold, and then they're shipping that elsewhere. And they never even were required to disclose where they're shipping that to be processed. So we just assumed it'd be Nevada or someplace, or maybe even overseas. So I think it'd be really great to ban it, because it's a horrible problem with the leaching of the cyanide, but it will help. There's ways around that too.
Yeah, and then one thing I'll add on the permanent protection side, there's lots of different tools out there in terms of land designations for federal public lands that will require more analysis, more layers of protection, and make it more difficult for mining companies to move forward with these proposals. But at the same time, because of the 1872 mining law, there's still this restriction to respect the valid and existing rights of the mining claims that are out there. So one way that these tools are useful is they force the companies and the land manager to go through what's called the validity exam process to actually look at whether their mining claims are valid or not, or they can be closed and put into protection. So that's one really useful tool, but it also puts the focus on why long-term, and Earthworks was founded to do this more than 30 years ago, and we're still trying to do it, but long-term, we really need reform of the 1872 mining law if we're going to better support our permanent protection efforts, because even with great conservation efforts, the mining law still prioritizes those mining claims, which can be really, really challenging.
Yeah, and I know that we kind of like went so fast, but that is for people that are a little bit less familiar with the BLM public lands rule. This is for the first time. And Wendy, please jump in. Like I'm going to say, but I know that you're so much more familiar. But it's going to be the first time in the history that conservation and biodiversity will be at the same, how can I say, the same level.
The same consideration level, yeah, but we just don't know how that's going to play out exactly. And that's why I said, like, we're going to be learning right alongside the BLM, but certainly the conservation community is going to push as hard as we can to make that turn into real land protections. But it can vary really wildly between different BLM field offices, kind of their feeling about the appropriateness of mining projects sort of in general, or conservation in general, or how they think that the land uses ought to be balanced. So it should be interesting seeing how this rolls out. But yes, theoretically it is supposed to put us on an even playing field, but then we still have the 1872 law. So how that's gonna work together, unclear.
Okay. Also, Wendy, I don't know if you saw Rena just put like I think a note for you as well. And maybe we'll close with that. And also, if you have not been to the Body Hills, Hawk Creek, or Conglomerate Mesa, especially during winter, I highly recommend you to visit, because you will see instantly how special, beautiful, and significant those lands are. And with that, I'm really thankful to the panelists. Thank you so much for putting the time for the presentation, for the discussion. Thank you everyone that stayed a little bit longer. I know that we needed to cut short the discussion, so I apologize if we did not have much time for questions and discussion, but there is great links there in email addresses if you want to get engaged. And Leah and I will follow up with an email with the video recording, the slides, and some key links, as well as some key answers to some of the questions that were submitted prior to this webinar.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
Yep,
Thank
thanks
you.
so much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful fall day.
Bye-bye.